In the solemn environment of a courtroom, where decorum and impartiality are expected to reign, a striking moment unfolded that defied the traditional script of judicial proceedings. The judge, seemingly dismissive and confident in their own authority, directed a mocking tone toward a member of the courtroom audience, a tone that suggested superiority and amusement, not fairness. This moment, while brief, encapsulated a troubling aspect of judicial conduct. The propensity, however rare, for those in power to act from a place of bias rather than justice. The courtroom is meant to be a space where arguments are weighed based on merit, evidence, and legal reasoning, not on appearances, status, or assumptions. When a judge chooses to mock rather than listen, the very foundation of that space is shaken. It becomes a performance, a stage for ego, rather than a forum for truth. This moment was not just about words or tone, it was about a lapse in the impartiality that defines the judicial role. The mockery came unprompted, stemming from what appeared to be preconceived notions about someone's presence, role, or perhaps presumed lack of credentials or ability. As this episode unfolded, it did more than highlight a lapse in decorum. It offered a live demonstration of how power can be misused, even subtly. A judge holds immense influence over the atmosphere of the courtroom. A word, a glance, even a smirk can change the tone of proceedings. When that influence is used to belittle, it sends a message to everyone present. It suggests that respect in the courtroom is conditional, not universal, that it must be earned by status or expectation rather than simply being a right of all who enter that space. What followed, however, served as a powerful counterweight to that moment of mockery. The assumptions that had prompted the judge's behavior were swiftly dismantled, not through confrontation or outrage, but through the quiet and undeniable presentation of competence. Every argument laid out, every reference cited, every logical thread pulled through with precision worked to reframe the earlier impression. The judge, who had indulged in sarcasm, now found themselves forced into a posture of attention and, eventually, respect. This reversal illustrated a profound truth about the legal process, that authority should never be a substitute for open-mindedness. The initial mockery revealed a courtroom dynamic in which perception trumped fairness. But the subsequent developments reminded all present that substance still holds the highest value in legal discourse. Despite the initial bias, facts, logic, and clarity of thought ultimately prevailed. The moment also had a ripple effect beyond just the participants. Others in the room, legal professionals, observers, perhaps even jury members, witnessed the transformation in tone and respect. They saw how a courtroom could shift from derision to reverence in the span of a single presentation. That transformation was not just an indictment of the judge's initial behavior, but a teaching moment about the resilience of truth and the danger of making assumptions. There's also a psychological dimension to consider. Judges are human, prone to the same cognitive shortcuts and prejudices as anyone else. But the robe, the bench, and the gavel are symbols meant to remind them of a higher standard. The moment of mockery was a crack in that standard, a glimpse into how personal judgment can sometimes override professional duty. Yet, it also became a mirror in which the judge could see the consequences of that lapse. A reminder, perhaps, that wisdom often lies in silence and observation, not in snide remarks. In a broader societal context, the incident reflects how quickly people are judged by surface-level impressions. It's a microcosm of how institutions sometimes function, on assumption, on visual cues, on the unspoken hierarchy of who belongs and who doesn't. That these instincts can be corrected, not by outrage but by competence and clarity, is both reassuring and instructive. Ultimately, this moment in the courtroom became more than just a personal encounter. It was a narrative about dignity, the need for humility, and the silent power of being underestimated. The judge's mockery, rather than diminishing the recipient, became a spotlight on the flaws within the system and on the capacity for those flaws to be corrected, not by force, but by undeniable skill and grace. In the world of law, where language is wielded with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, few things are as compelling as a performance that combines deep preparation with intellectual dexterity. In the courtroom, such a display can turn the tide of proceedings, alter the perceptions of seasoned professionals, and shift the balance of credibility. What unfolded during this particular courtroom exchange was a masterclass in how knowledge, strategy, and articulation can silence doubt and command respect, even in the face of initial skepticism or ridicule. There is an unspoken hierarchy in legal environments, often dictated by titles, experience, or reputation. Yet, these markers can sometimes lead to a complacency that overlooks the essential currency of the courtroom: preparation. No matter the standing of those involved, the individual who arrives with an intimate understanding of the case, armed with statutes, precedent, and logic, holds a power that transcends external perceptions. This principle was brought to life, vividly in a moment that began with doubt and condescension, but ended in the unmistakable presence of competence. The courtroom thrives on structure, on the idea that law is applied equally, guided by evidence and argument. When someone demonstrates not only fluency in legal language, but also the ability to anticipate challenges, deconstruct opposing points, and construct airtight reasoning, it disrupts any attempt to diminish them. It demands attention. The mood in the courtroom shifts when clarity and confidence emerge from a source previously underestimated. That shift is not the result of confrontation or emotion, but of pure analytical force. The power of preparation in this case was evident in the seamless flow of facts and the strategic positioning of key legal arguments. Nothing was random. Each point connected logically to the next, forming a narrative that was both compelling and difficult to dispute. Case law was not just quoted, but contextualized, applied in ways that anticipated rebuttals. It wasn't just a show of memorization. It was synthesis, interpretation, and timing. The result was not merely impressive. It was unassailable. Observers could see the transformation take place in real time. Those who may have entered the courtroom with their own biases began to reevaluate. With each response to the judge's inquiry, with every reference drawn from legal precedent, perceptions began to shift. The atmosphere changed from one of quiet amusement to one of growing respect. The words spoke for themselves, cutting through any lingering doubt like a finely honed blade. What made the performance so striking wasn't just the intellectual rigor, but the restraint. There was no grandstanding, no emotional plea, just precision and poise. Confidence was projected not through volume or bravado, but through mastery of the material. This is where true legal skill resides, not in overpowering the courtroom with personality, but in commanding it with substance. Such a display serves as a reminder that legal talent does not always arrive cloaked in the expected symbols of authority. Often, it reveals itself in moments of challenge when the stakes are high and the eyes of authority are skeptical. It's in those moments that preparation becomes power, and the disciplined mind becomes the most persuasive force in the room. The irony, of course, lies in how easily that force was initially dismissed. The assumption that one lacks the necessary acumen based on superficial judgments is not unique to this courtroom, but it is especially glaring when it occurs in a setting that is supposed to elevate reason over assumption. The swift reversal that followed was not a fluke. It was the natural consequence of someone outworking, outthinking, and outmaneuvering those who had underestimated the situation. This moment also reaffirmed the idea that knowledge is not only protective, it is transformative. In the hands of someone prepared, it reshapes the dynamics of power. It turns dismissiveness into admiration and silence into deference. The shift in tone was unmistakable. What began as a gesture of mockery quickly evolved into something far more rare in courtrooms governed by strict protocol: genuine surprise followed by acknowledgement. That is the enduring power of preparation paired with expertise. It can stand unshaken under scrutiny, it can challenge authority without confrontation, and it can reverse narratives with nothing more than carefully chosen words and unshakable logic. In the end, it reminds everyone watching that in law, as in life there is no substitute for. In any courtroom, the judge occupies a unique position. not just as an arbiter of law, but as a representative of fairness, authority, and composure. The integrity of the judicial process relies heavily on the ability of judges to remain impartial, to treat all participants with dignity, and to keep personal biases firmly in check. When that expectation is breached, even subtly, the consequences can ripple far beyond a single case. In this instance, a seemingly off-handed display of mockery disrupted the balance and revealed a deeper truth about the importance of humility within the judiciary. The robe, the bench, and the elevated position within the courtroom symbolize more than hierarchy. They represent trust. Litigants, attorneys, jurors, and the public look to the judge not just for decisions, but for a sense that the process itself is being conducted with seriousness and integrity. When a judge allows sarcasm or derision to enter the courtroom, especially without cause, it undermines that trust. It sends a message that the court is not immune to prejudice, that justice might not be administered with equal weight for all. In this particular moment, the judge stepped outside the boundaries of professionalism. A comment made in jest, delivered from a position of immense power, landed not as humor but as condescension. The reaction in the courtroom was not just one of discomfort, but of recognition, an awareness that something had gone wrong, that the tone had shifted from respectful inquiry to something far more personal and inappropriate. It was a breach of decorum, but more importantly, it was a failure to uphold the fundamental responsibility of neutrality. What followed was not a confrontation, nor was it a breakdown of proceedings. Instead, it became a quiet but powerful lesson in restraint and professionalism. The individual targeted by the judge's remarks responded not with emotion, but with clarity, substance, and composure. The courtroom witnessed not only the unraveling of the judge's assumption, but also the re-establishment of order through reason and fact. This reversal became a moment of reckoning, not for the individual being mocked, but for the judge whose authority had momentarily lapsed into arrogance. This is the paradox at the heart of the judiciary. Judges are expected to lead, to control the courtroom, and to interpret the law with wisdom. Yet that very expectation demands a deep humility, a recognition that with great authority comes an even greater need for self-awareness. When a judge chooses to mock rather than listen, to assume rather than inquire, they forfeit a piece of that authority. They allow ego to eclipse the solemnity of their role. What this episode demonstrated so clearly is that respect in the courtroom must be mutual. It cannot be demanded through position alone. It must be earned and maintained through behavior. A judge who treats participants with condescension, even momentarily, diminishes the perceived legitimacy of their decisions. It reminds everyone present that even in the most formal settings, human flaws can surface. But it also shows how those flaws can be corrected when the dignity of legal discourse reasserts itself. There is an instructive value in such moments, especially for those observing from the sidelines. Law students, junior attorneys, and even seasoned legal professionals take note of how power is exercised. They see that arrogance can be disarming, but humility is far more persuasive. They see that the courtroom is not just a venue for argument, it is a stage for ethics, for conduct, for modeling the values that underpin justice. The incident also casts a light on the culture of the judiciary itself. Judges, like any professionals, operate within communities. Their behavior reflects not only on them personally, but on the institution as a whole. When one judge falters in their treatment of others, it risks eroding public confidence in the judicial system. Conversely, when that misstep is met not with retaliation but with poise and precision, it restores balance and reaffirms the strength of the system. Ultimately, the moment served as a subtle but profound reminder: the courtroom is not a place for performance but for principle. Those entrusted with upholding the law must do so not only with intellect, but with humility. They must resist the temptation to elevate themselves above the process, for it is the process, not the individual, that lends legitimacy to their role. When humility is absent, the robe loses its weight. When it is present, even in the face of challenge, it becomes a symbol not of power, but of earned respect. The courtroom is often seen as a place of solemnity, order, and procedure, But it is also a stage where human behavior unfolds in full view, not only of those physically present, but increasingly of the public at large. In today's digital age, moments that once remained within the walls of a courthouse are rapidly broadcast and dissected across media platforms, shaping public understanding of justice and accountability. When an unexpected incident occurs, particularly one involving the behavior of a judge, it doesn't remain confined to legal circles. It becomes a story, a symbol, and sometimes a catalyst for broader conversations about the legal system itself. The media plays a central role in amplifying these moments, capturing the dynamics of power, bias, and correction. In this particular instance, the courtroom exchange began with a tone of mockery and dismissal, but evolved into something entirely different, drawing widespread attention. The shift in atmosphere from derision to recognition was subtle in real time, but glaring when examined through the lens of public scrutiny. The retelling of the event across news outlets, social media posts, and opinion pieces ensured that the impact extended far beyond the case at hand. Public reaction to such incidents is rarely passive. Viewers and readers interpret the courtroom drama through their own experiences and perspectives, often using it to confirm or challenge their beliefs about fairness, authority, and justice. When a judge is seen to overstep the bounds of professionalism, especially when it involves dismissiveness or bias, it touches on a deeply rooted expectation that those who preside over justice must do so without prejudice. This expectation is not just legal, it is moral, and when it appears to be violated, the public response can be swift and unforgiving. The viral nature of such events can prompt institutional reflection. Bar associations, judicial oversight boards, and legal educators begin to reassess how courtroom conduct is taught, monitored, and corrected. It often takes a widely publicized incident to bring long-standing issues into sharper focus. Questions about judicial temperament, implicit bias, and the culture of deference that sometimes shields judges from criticism. When the spotlight is turned on the bench, it forces a reconsideration of what accountability looks like for those at the highest level of courtroom authority. In this scenario, the media coverage did more than report facts. It framed a narrative. Headlines highlighted the unexpected reversal in courtroom tone, opinion pieces explored themes of power dynamics and respect, and comment sections buzzed with debate. For many, the moment became a metaphor for underestimation, for the fallibility of those in authority, and for the redemptive power of expertise and dignity. These narratives, while shaped by the particulars of one event, often take on broader cultural meanings, fueling discussions about who gets to be heard, who is dismissed, and how justice should be conducted. At the same time, such coverage can serve as a mirror for the judiciary itself. Judges, though often removed from the public eye, are not immune to reputation. Their conduct, when publicly criticized or praised, can influence how future cases are approached and how judicial behavior is monitored. A single misstep, when amplified, can trigger demands for reform, not just of individuals, but of systems. Calls for increased judicial training, clearer codes of conduct, and even public oversight mechanisms often gain momentum after moments like this one enter the national consciousness. What makes these events resonate so deeply is the element of surprise, the breaking of expectations. When those presumed to hold all the power in a courtroom are shown to have erred, and when that error is corrected not with confrontation but with professionalism and substance, it strikes a chord. It reassures some that the legal system still has internal correctives, while reminding others how fragile the perception of justice can be. Media coverage in this way becomes a double-edged force, exposing flaws while also spotlighting instances of grace under pressure. In an era where institutional trust is under constant strain, moments like these gain symbolic weight. The courtroom, once seen as a closed chamber of arcane ritual, is increasingly understood as a public space, subject to the same demands for transparency, respect, and accountability as any other institution. The media, for better or worse, has become a participant in this process, helping to define which moments matter and why. The story that unfolded in that courtroom was no longer just about procedure. It became a reflection of deeper societal questions, broadcast to an audience eager to make meaning of it. The events that unfolded in that courtroom serve as more than just a momentary disruption in legal proceedings. They reflect enduring truths about power, perception, and the principles that underpin justice. What began as a fleeting instance of mockery evolved into a profound demonstration of competence, professionalism, and the subtle forces that shape courtroom dynamics. This wasn't merely a clash of personalities. It was a reminder of how the justice system, even with its rigid structures and formalities, remains deeply human at its core. The behavior of the judge, initially dismissive, reveals how even those in positions of authority are susceptible to misjudgment. It underscores the critical importance of judicial humility, an attribute that should be as essential to the bench as legal knowledge itself. A courtroom is not only governed by laws and precedents, but by the atmosphere created through respect, fairness, and the presumption that everyone deserves to be heard on equal footing. When that atmosphere is disrupted by arrogance or assumption, it threatens the credibility of the entire process. However, what emerged from that disruption was something unexpectedly powerful. Without grandstanding, confrontation, or dramatics, the target of that mockery responded in the most compelling way possible, through skill, preparation, and unshakable focus. That response reshaped the narrative, restoring balance to the room and, in doing so, reaffirming the values that the legal system is meant to uphold. There was no need for retaliation, only the quiet strength of reason and knowledge. The broader impact of this moment lies in its visibility. In a time when public trust in institutions is increasingly fragile, stories like these resonate far beyond the courtroom. They become symbols of both what can go wrong and how it can be corrected. The media's role in amplifying such moments ensures that they don't disappear into the background. They become part of our collective understanding of justice. They spark necessary conversations about the responsibilities of those in power and the dignity of those who are underestimated. This incident, in all its nuance, invites reflection at every level. For judges, it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency and the enduring need for humility. For legal professionals and the public alike, it reinforces the idea that the courtroom is not a place for theatrics or ego, but for measured argument and principled conduct. It reminds us that power must always be exercised with restraint, and that true authority is most effective when it is grounded in fairness. In the end, justice is not only determined by the decisions made, but by how those decisions are reached. It is shaped by the tone, behavior, and respect shown to every participant. And sometimes it is in the quiet correction of an assumption, the reversal of a dismissive tone, that the principles of justice shine.